Hey, crazy friends. Welcome to another Crazy Faith Sunday. We are in the middle of a series looking at 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 18. And this is the story of what happened to Elijah right after the greatest victory in his ministry, which is the defeating of the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel and the ending of the drought. So this is our fourth message in the series. We're slowly walking down through the verses. Last week, we looked at verses 4 and 5, and we were reminded that we serve a God that pursues us. Even when we're running away from Him, He's running to us. Elijah, in his fear and his doubt, has turned and run away. He's running away from the queen. He's running away from his servants and his friends. He's running away from God. He's running away from everything. He lays down and he literally wants to die. He's in a deep state of depression. And yet, in that moment, the Lord sends an angel to him, because the Lord is still pursuing him, even when he's running away. And we were reminded that no matter how far we have run from God, no matter how far we ever could run from God, He's always right there, waiting to receive us back. So we're going to keep going and look a little bit more at this depression that Elijah is in and exactly how the Lord addresses that in verses 5 through 8. But first, let's go back and let's read again the full context of this passage. So Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a message to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Then he was afraid. And he rose and he ran for his life, and he came to Beersheba, which belonged to Judah, and he left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he asked that he might die, saying, "It is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers." And he lay down and he slept under a broom tree. And behold, an angel touched him, and said to him, "Arise and eat." And he looked, and behold, there at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate, and he drank, and he laid down again. And the angel of the Lord came again a second time, and touched him, and said, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." And he arose, and he ate, and he drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Hebron, the mount of God. There he came to a cave, and lodging in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant. They've thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." And he said, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountain and broke it to pieces, the rock before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak, and he went out, and he stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him, and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenants, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." And the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king of Syria, and Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall appoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat, of Abel Meholam, you shall appoint as the prophet in your place. And the one who escapes the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death. And the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. So we're going to look today again right at the middle of this passage where Elijah has run away. And remember that here at the beginning of the passage, in light of this amazing miracle that God has done, Jezebel, though she could have been stirred to faith through seeing this power of God, she's stirred to anger, and she promises that she's going to kill Elijah. And Elijah, instead of standing firm in the power that he's just seen displayed in his God on Mount Carmel, he gets scared and he runs away. He runs away from the queen, he runs away from the servants, he runs away from God, he runs away from everybody. But God pursues him into this wilderness, into this state of depression. And we know that he's depressed because in verse 4, remember that it says he came and he sat down under a broom tree and he asked that he might die. We'll pick up in verse 5, and it says, And he lay down and he slept under the broom tree, and behold, an angel touched him and said to him, Arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and he drank and he lay down. And the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. And he arose and he ate and he drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb, the Mount of God. And there he came to a cave, and he lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. So again, I don't think there's much doubt that Elijah is completely depressed right here. And I think that's something that's common to all mankind, right? We all struggle with that at some level or another, at some time or another. And I think in the last season of this world, we've become a lot more depressed. There's going to a lot of reasons of why that might be, but I think it's easy to account for the fact that depression is running rampant among us right now. But when that happens, we can remember that it's not anything that's new, right? It's common to the human condition because of the sin that we carry around with us. And we see even spiritual giants like Elijah struggling with it. But I think we can also see in this passage, through the way that God deals with it, the reality that we are so complex in our makeup. You see, because if you look here, we see that what God does through the angel and through his word is that, number one, he sends rest and food to Elijah. Number two, he listens to him. And number three, he gives him a new word and a new direction. I think we can see pretty clearly from that the reality that we are not just physical beings. We are physical beings, we are spiritual beings, and we are emotional beings. And God understood that because he's the one that created us. He created us in this complex beauty in his own image. And we see him addressing that here in all of those different areas. You see, we can see that God understands that Elijah is a physical being because he sends rest and food. We can see that God understands that Elijah is an emotional being because he lets him vent his frustration here and even further down in the passage that we're going to get to in the coming weeks. But we see that he also understands that he's a spiritual being because he sends him a new word. I think one of the problems a lot of times when we, especially as Christians, struggle with and try to tackle depression is we just try to address one of those areas, right? We treat depression like it's only a spiritual issue or only a physical issue or only an emotional issue. When the truth is it's a complex issue that is all of those things And so if we're truly going to address it, we have to address all of those things. But a lot of times we don't. We just pick one and we kind of hyper focus in on it, right? Like a lot of times we just isolate depression that it's a spiritual issue. And so you hear people say, well, that person just needs to have more faith, or that person just needs to pray about it. And while those things are absolutely true, they are incomplete to address the complexities of depression. Or we'll treat ourselves just like we're only a physical being, and depression's only a physical issue. And so then we just say, well, you just need to get a pill, right? You just need to get on some drugs to help you with that because it's just physical. So you need to go to your doctor. You need to get some good drugs. And we ignore the other two aspects of it. Or we treat it as like it's an emotional thing, right? Like, well, you just need to go have a good cry, right? Or you just need to vent that anger out, right? Go punch a wall. And that ignores the other two. So the reality is, and God understands that here in this passage, is that we are complex beings made up of all of those. And so when we are attacked by depression, we can't simply fall into any single one of those, right? We have to be willing to understand that depression is all of those things, and we have to be willing to look at all of those. For example, we have to address the physical aspect of our depression. There are some times when you're feeling down and depressed, and honestly, the best thing that you can do is just go take a nap, right? We see this is what Elijah did. There are times when we need to look at physically, what are we doing to our bodies, right? Are we running too hard and putting too much stress, not getting enough sleep, not eating well, not exercising? We have to face the reality that part of our depression is tied up in this physical realm, and we have to do the physical things that we can do to help with that. We also have to address the emotional side of it. There are deep-seated things in our past that may be adding to this, right? And we're never, ever a victim to those things that happen in our past, right? That's antithetical to the gospel. Through the gospel, we are a new creation. And so the truth in that is no matter what it is in our past, we are not held in bondage to it, but it is a reality that we have to deal with. And sometimes those are deep scar issues that we need spiritual mentors, maybe even biblical counselors, pastoral counselors, to help us walk through some of those things. And finally, we have to address the spiritual aspect of it. God is the renewer of our spirits. He's the one that makes us whole. And any type of effort to address our depression without looking at that reality is going to be futile. You have to examine your spiritual life. God gave a new word to Elijah. Maybe God has a new word for you in your life, but you're not ever going to hear it if you're disconnected from His word, if you're disconnected from His community, the church. Those are the places that He speaks into us. And if we're disconnected from that, then we're going to dry up spiritually. And no single one of those is always going to be the answer. You've got to be willing to look at all of them when you're tackling depression. Last week we talked about how the fact that God pursues us even in our depression. He wants to see us healed and made whole, right? We know, we understand from 2 weeks ago that there is sin and brokenness in this world that we are not going to escape until we get to heaven. But there are also levels of depression and spiritual warfare that we do not have to live with if we are children of God. There is a path to overcome those. There is a victory to be had. We can give that yoke over to Him. But we have to be willing to admit and understand that we are physical, emotional, and spiritual beings. And we have to be willing to look and address all of those, just as Elijah did, so that healing can be found. Restoration can be found. Forgiveness can be found. Because we serve a God who gives grace in abundance. And He cares for you even when you're depressed. Pray with me. Father God, we thank you that you made us so wonderfully complex. And Father, we thank you that there are avenues that we can address our physical, our emotional, and our spiritual needs. And Father, the next time that we are angry or depressed, Father, help us to be willing to truthfully examine all of those areas of our life and determine what we need to change in each one of those so that we can get back in alignment to you and that we can live in victory and in forgiveness. Father, for those that are struggling with the depression, God, I pray that you help them to see just a spark of light that would be enough for them to keep moving forward. Father, help them to understand that there are those around them that care for them, and above all, there's a God that cares for them. Help them to find physical, emotional, and spiritual help that they need. And God, we ask all this in Jesus' name.